This next study is about the preference for cliques and what this study on social dominance orientation tells us about hierarchy in the workplace. And the researchers here focus on whether the associations of positive and negative contact with prejudice are moderated by SDO, which is social dominance orientation. And a little background to this is related to intergroup contact theory. Social dominance orientation is a variable specifically that indicates a preference or not for unequal relationships between groups in the society that is being studied. And so it's something that's interesting to be studied within intergroup contact, especially when you have two opposing groups. And that's kind of what this study is focused on. And they hypothesize here that positive contact would be associated with more positive behavioral intentions only among these high social dominance orientation people. The association between negative contact and more negative behavioral intentions should be stronger among high SDOs compared to low SDOs. Third, positive contact should be associated with more positive behavioral intention, and negative contact with less positive behavioral intentions among individuals should be, well, high but not low in SDO. And the methods here were that the sample consisted of 325 people, 191 were female, and the authors measured prejudice, positive contact, negative contact, and SDO. To assess prejudice, the authors used a measure of behavioral intentions to have contact with outgroup in the future, with the outgroup in the future. And to assess positive contact, they used items on a survey like, I cooperated with blank in some tasks. This outgroup greeted me actively. I participated in or organized activities with this outgroup, or I had delicious food or traveled with this outgroup. The negative contact, on the other hand, was assessed with things like the outgroup responded indifferently to the conversation initiated by myself. The outgroup insulted or threatened me. I had trouble with the outgroup in school activities or in daily life. And then the outgroup and I had divergent opinions on ethnic issues. And finally, SDO was measured using the short version of this SDO scale. And something to be noted here, so this study specifically focused on the Han community in China, which accounts for around 91% or so of the total population, versus and I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, but the Uyghur, is that correct? Uyghur community, which represents only 0.76% of the population. And they differ in areas of language, religion, and customs. And so those are the communities that this study is looking at, which I know has been up in the news a lot more recently. So the results here are that, in line with the first hypothesis, positive contact was positively related to behavioral intentions among high SDOs, but not among low SDOs. So people who are high SDO take advantage of hierarchy, enhancing ideologies such as prejudice to establish or maintain hierarchical rather than egalitarian relations between social groups. For the second hypothesis, negative contact was negatively related to behavioral intentions among high SDOs. And then in contrast with hypothesis 3, positive contact was positively associated with behavioral intentions, both for high and low SDO individuals. And then hypothesis 4, negative association between negative contact and behavioral intentions was significant among low SDOs. And what Anupriya took away from this is looking at social dominance orientation at work to see if employees are more dominating the others, occupy maybe more space, or prefer there to be some sort of hierarchical associations between departments or in their teams. Leaders could find kind of what kind of schools people have attended, or based on age, seniority, any other factor to monitor employee levels of SDO. And employees with high SDO might be unconsciously creating divisions, and they found in the foundation for future conflicts to build on. I think this is somewhere that our training and services can kind of come into to help recognize where maybe some of these dynamics are occurring, and help train people to deal with conflict, interact with each other in ways that are healthy. So that's what we have for this study.
Yeah, places another sort of highlight on leadership, right? And I think we talk a lot about that, especially with regard to sort of diversity and inclusion and how the workplace is set up. So I think this also highlights that, just how, you know, the awareness and certain actions that are necessary for leaders.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely taps into the diversity and inclusion aspect. It's all about intergroup contact.
I wonder what kind of leads to people being most socially dominant oriented. I wonder how that occurs. Is it just like they're taught that through their family or community, or?
I wonder if that's it. I mean, at least in this example, I don't know if you all probably know more maybe about this specific conflicts with the Uyghur and Han communities, but like it makes me think of like maybe people will have some sort of, I don't know if this is true of these communities, but like some sort of ethnic superiority in some ways, or that would be my guess, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is a really difficult and sort of intractable conflict that's been going on in China for a while, that the larger community, the global community, is recently being exposed to. But the Uyghur, from like what we've seen on the news lately, is that, yeah, they're absolutely sort of ostracized by the larger community. They're a minority that is looked at as inferior, and there's all these sort of, like what we've seen lately, there's these schools that the Han community, the Chinese government is sort of saying that, oh, these are developing schools for the Uyghur community, but really it's like trying to slowly change their belief system and things like that. So I think that in regards to this study, it's a little bit more, there's a lot within this context doesn't really.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that I don't know, I mean, the truth, but that's what we've been seeing lately. Yeah, so but to Jeremy's question, I think like what leads to that is what you're exposed to and how you're treated by majorities. Like how, you know, so if the Uyghur community is treated as inferior by the larger community, they would have like a lower SDO. I don't know if I'm understanding that correctly, but.
Yeah, well, certainly the Han, in this case, the Han community is like high social dominance orientation, like that would obviously contribute to prejudice, which is kind of what that first line is about. And then people that don't have this high social dominance orientation won't have as much prejudice and much, at least that kind of behavior. I'm not sure about the like between the two groups. I feel like my guess is social dominance orientation. This was primarily focused on within the Han community here, and I feel like that's primarily where social dominance orientation plays a role. I don't know how it would play a role in the lesser community, you know, or the lesser population. Tony, did you have something before you froze up?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about it as it applies to, you know, clients we work with now. And so act in a very different context. So, you know, looking at organizations here in the United States with all different kinds of people. And so I'm really looking at it purely as like cliques that naturally form in the workplace. And it's not even just the workplace, but in churches and schools, everywhere, you have naturally forming cliques. And they do have different levels of social dominance. I mean, it just like, I mean, think about like high school. And so you have your stereotypical cliques of like the popular kids, and then you have your kids that are, into puzzles or whatever else, and then you have your band kids and you have your athletes, and in the workplace it's the same thing. And a lot of times it's because of the team you work on, but then also it could be because of people that you just are drawn to, that you all have certain things in common, that it's easier to relate to, it's easier to communicate with, and you feel more comfortable with them. And sometimes those people might be in that same level of social dominance that you are, and sometimes they're not. And so yeah, I mean, that's what I'm looking at. That's why I keep kind of like, I wonder how this would affect like here and now and the people that we work with. And I think like all these factors, like it says that leaders could find out what kinds of schools people attended in workplaces now. I mean, there's certain schools that apparently, carry more weight. If you have an Ivy League education, a lot of times that's thought of as raising your stock. I won't necessarily say social dominance, but like raising your stock in the workplace. All kinds of things, your seniority, your age. Younger people sometimes don't feel as heard and valued in the workplace. And they might tend to bond and form cliques based upon that, like that shared feeling of, well, we're the young kids, we're the young people in the organization, and they're not listening to us, or they don't pay as much attention to us. So, those sorts of things I think we can see everywhere. I don't necessarily think cliques are bad, but I do think as a leader, we have to pay attention to them and make sure that they are not hindering the development of other work relationships. But I mean, they're good because they can provide support for the people that are in them, because everyone needs to have their group or their person. So they're good in that respect, but not if one group has more power, or if the others perceive one group to have more power. Um, then I think that that's where it could be a problem. So anyway, that's just what I was thinking. Sorry.
Tony, I'm really glad that you shared that too. And as you were talking, I was thinking, uh, looking at the workplace as you are, what is the goal, right? Is the goal to have like no social dominance oriented, like, or like to even it out, like rather than like we're talking about high and low social dominance orientation in the workplace. I think it's the leaders and the structure needs to figure out like what is their goal. Do they want to try and limit or try to like decrease that desire for hierarchy and in group out group? Like if that's the goal, then these takeaways and like these action steps, as you were speaking to, Tony, are very vital, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would think that that's the goal, right? To not have high desire for, hierarchy and in group out group.
Mm-hmm.
But
I feel like it all depends. It depends on the group. It depends on how how they act as a group, like whether they exclude others. If because they're in a group, it's easier for them to be unkind, easier for them to make other people feel bad. If because they're in a group, they have more influence over certain things that maybe they shouldn't, or maybe one or two people wouldn't. So I think all of that depends, because it also could just be that as a group, they provide a lot of support and feedback and for one another, and that it ends up being really good for the workplace. And so, I just think as a leader, it's something else to be thinking about, something else to be watching.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really great pointer to how this can affect the workplace. And yeah, and to be aware of how maybe some systems or some structures or policies in organizations can I don't know, being wary of people who try to, in this case, like take advantage of hierarchy enhancing ideologies, or trying to find ways to, I don't know, to promote yourself up over others in maybe unfair ways. I think there's another kind of element there as well, to be wary of for organizations.